What's the password?
What?
Nope.
Open this door!
Not even close.
For people wondering why Native Hawaiians are begging people to stop moving to Hawaii, in the house I'm in right now, my grandmother bought this back in 1955 or so for $25,000. It is now 2021, which is 70 or so, 65 years later than that, and I just looked up my house on Zillow. This is what it's currently at, from $25,000 in 1955 to over $1.8 million in 2021. The median income of somebody in 1955 was about $22,000. For proof, here's about 1955. That's the 22,000 line. The median income of somebody right now in Hawaii is $35,000. Right again, right here, median income 2019, $35,000. If the median income has only increased about $10,000 in the past 65 years, but houses have gone up from 25 grand to 1.8 million, give or take, there is no feasible way for natives to continue to sustain themselves and live here in our homelands in Hawaii. This is why we are so upset about Mark Zuckerberg purchasing 600 acres of land in Kauai and taking that away from natives. This is why we are so upset about people on TikTok making moving to Hawaii with absolutely nothing a trend. Houselessness here in Hawaii isn't a trend. The US sends their homeless population to Hawaii. They give them a one-way ticket to Hawaii to get rid of the homeless and houseless problem in their lands, and they send them to us because they figured that these houseless people would rather live in a place with no snow or as harsh weather conditions here. And not to mention that Native Hawaiians have the highest houselessness rate in Hawaii. And I say houseless instead of homeless because we are not homeless. Hawaii is our home. We just can't afford to live here anymore. And this is definitely a different tone than my other videos because I'm past the point of being mad. I'm exhausted, as I'm sure hundreds and thousands of other Native Hawaiians are. We're exhausted. It's tiring, it's stressful to continue to educate people about why it's so wrong when people are just blatantly ignorant and do not want to acknowledge the signs and the facts and do the research and education for themselves. The research and the facts are out there on the internet. Anybody can use Google. It's whether someone chooses to acknowledge and accept the truth and realize that their actions have real consequences on anyone else but themselves. So please, I know this one TikTok might not prevent someone from moving here, but just think about your actions and your consequences about what they have on Native Hawaiians. Why do people automatically assume that if Hawaii was to get their independence and sovereignty back, that we would lose all of our electronics, all of our electricity, all of our water? No, in fact, actually, Iolani Palace had electricity 4 years before the White House. Can you imagine that another country did something better before the USA? Shocking. We were one of the most highly literate countries in the world. We had our own newspaper. We had education at the forefront of our kingdom and our country. Hawaii was just fine. We still are, were and are internationally recognized as a sovereign kingdom. So if we were to get our independence back, we would not lose anything. All they would just be is a transfer of power from the US back to Hawaii in its own kingdom. The whole point is that we wouldn't have to sell if we could afford to live here in the first place. Like, do you think any of Hawaiians want to leave Hawaii? Do you think any of us want to leave our known native homeland? But there are more Native Hawaiians who live outside of Hawaii than do in our own ancestral homeland, which is alarming and terrifying, to be honest. None of us want to leave here, and none of us should have to leave here. It is like our birthright. It is our genealogy. It is our history. It is our culture. It is who we are to be of this land and be on this land. None of us should have to leave because of people who want to come in and price us out and gentrify our culture and abuse it for money and power. Okay, this is the difference in what we're talking about when we say there is a sense of entitlement of malihini or outsiders or haole in Hawaii. If you live here in Hawaii, if you are not Native Hawaiian, you are a guest on Hawaiian land. You are a guest on land illegally occupied by the United States of America. Similarly, if you live on the continent in what is currently known as the United States of America, you are a guest on the land of whatever tribe you are inhabiting. For example, I am a student at Stanford University up in Palo Alto in the fake state of California. I am a guest on Muwekma Ohlone land whenever I am a student up there. Whenever I go up there, I am a guest on Muwekma Ohlone land. If you live in Hawaii, you are a guest on Hawaiian, on Kanaka Maoli land. Just because you live here, it does not mean that this land is yours. In Hawaiian language, the word for water is vai. The word for wealthy is vai vai, because Hawaiians recognize that if you have a lot of resources, for example, if you have a lot of water, if you have a lot of this life-sustaining source, you are wealthy, because we did not measure our wealth in terms of money. We recognize that the land is forever above us, will always be above us, and we are stewards of the land. Even Native Hawaiians ourselves, we recognize that we are stewards of the land. We are not above the land. There is an olelo no eo, or a Hawaiian proverb stating, he ali'i ka'aina, he koa ke kanaka, meaning the land is chief and man is its servant. We are all guests here. We are not above the land. We are of the land. There is a big difference. So, yeah, just because you live here does not mean that it is your land to begin with. First and foremost, it is Hawaiian land, but even on top of that, we are all guests. We are not above this place. We are not above the beautiful place we get to call home. Nope, no, that's not the way it works. Hawaiians did not believe that you could buy and sell land. You can't buy and sell something that belongs to the common good of everybody else. And that is a main difference between Native perspective and Western perspective. Western perspective comes in, it's all about greed and money and take. I want this, I want that. Everything belongs to me. No, that's not the case at all.
Hello you guys, thank you so much for tuning into this video. So first I want to start off by saying I want to start this video off with Hawaii, because Hawaii is what kind of sparked my interest in this topic. Now of course I noticed Nashville because I live in Nashville. I noticed rent rising here. I noticed housing prices rising here. But Hawaii made me think like, okay, this is happening in Hawaii. Is this a Hawaii problem or is this an America problem? And that's why I decided to do this video. Now, in regards to Hawaii, I understand completely how she feels. I understand completely because when it's your home, it's where you've been growing up, where your grandparents were raised, where your ancestors were raised, and now it's getting to the point where you can't live there, you can't afford to live there. That is very scary and that's very sad, and it should make you very frustrated and it will make you very angry. And I understand where she's coming from, but I think that she does not realize that this is happening all over America. And that is what I want to point out in this video, that this isn't just a Hawaii problem. This isn't just a Nashville problem. This isn't just a Miami or a Orlando or Tampa, Florida problem or a Texas problem. This is happening all across America in metropolitan cities. Rent is rising, mortgages are rising, the cost of living is rising, and it's happening everywhere. And instead of telling people, hey, stop coming here, because I don't think we can control what other people do. This is a free country after all, and people are free to come and go as they please. I think there should be another solution that we could come up with, that we could work together and come up with a solution to fix this problem. But she made some really good points. If y'all want to know more about Hawaii and what's going on there, y'all should check out her videos. because she really taught me a lot listening to her videos. And people are very ignorant in the comments. I don't know if y'all could read the comment that was on there that she was referring to, but people are very ignorant, which we know. But she has really good videos about the topic. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to New York. We all know New York has been gentrified. So let's hear from people in New York about this topic.
Ma, respectfully, see that you're over there in Herald Square on 34th Street? You see those folks that need help on those platforms having full-on conversations with themselves? I don't think that mise en scène constitutes as a vibe.
Oh, like seriously, this doesn't only go for New York, but like I do have a story about that. Getting older in Jersey City, which is like right next to New York, everybody's dream was to go to New York. Got a job in New York, you got money. Not only is that far from the truth, but let me fucking tell you, your New York dream dies. You want to go deeper into the city? Dies. Oh, you gotta get home at 3 a.m.? Dies. Whether it comes to New York City or the city even where I'm from, the only people that glorify that shit are the people that came from like the West, like gentrifiers. No one legitimately loves the shittiness of their city.
Let's go to this meeting. Let's go. It'll be like a pre-game.
This video was weird to me, and let me talk about it. First of all, I know this is satirical and like is meant to be satirical. I get that. So the first thing is that this person is obviously not being like a perfect member of their community and are obviously contributing to gentrification in this sketch. But if we refuse to allow people to be imperfect members of their communities, people aren't going to even try. And so yes, they are contributing to this bad system of gentrification, but a lot of people do, and I would rather someone move in and like try to be a better community member. Like, do I think this is my perfect advocate? No. But do I think this person will show up to make calls to like City Hall when we need to? Yeah, probably. And that is a lot. That is a lot more than a lot of people in the comments, I feel like, who are making fun of these types of videos are doing. Like, I would rather have this performative ally who does something than someone who's posting just Instagram infographics. We are not all perfect advocates all the time.
For an honest conversation about gentrification, part 2. This is a familiar image, a marker of gentrification. The most visible aspect of gentrification is the landscape change. Buildings like that popping up, new cafes, new stores, new amenities to cater to these new residents. Rents rise, the original residents are pushed out. Simply put, displacement occurs. Now, you will often find folks who say things like, well, gentrification is improving the quality of a neighborhood. How can that be a bad thing? Well, firstly, none of this is done with the input or buy-in of the existing community. And these new amenities are not created with them in mind. They are not the target customer. Obviously, this is just one anecdotal story, but I really do think that it is illustrative of how these diversifying communities can really just end up being discriminatory and exclusionary. And all of that coupled with displacement is in and of itself harmful. But there is another dangerous, harmful part of gentrification that is often glossed over. The criminalization of communities of color that oftentimes follows this influx of white residents. Many times, these residents come into the community without any sort of cultural awareness or sensitivity and harbor biases that lead them to get law enforcement involved in quality of life issues. Also, just more broadly, we understand that generally there will be an increased police presence to help those residents feel more safe. And I know I don't have to elaborate here on why that poses a threat. Let's talk solutions. Just as the environment was created for gentrification to flourish through bad racist policies, so too can it be rectified through policy. We need to increase opportunities for Black homeownership. We need to preserve the existing affordable housing stock and build new, deeply affordable housing units. We need to drastically expand rent control and involve community stakeholders in the decision-making process of what goes on in their neighborhoods. I have included a list of orgs in my bio that are doing this work if you are interested in getting more involved.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm definitely going to check out those organizations in her bio because this is a very serious issue. But oh my gosh, she brought up so many good points and she just explained it so well. The first thing that I do want to say is yes, the dangerous effects of gentrification is that a lot of these people that come into the communities are not sensitive, they're not aware, they don't know what's going on in the community, and they also have their own biases, which does increase the police presence, which is very dangerous. for the people that are already in the community. So I love that she touched on that point, and I loved her solutions as well. Now, of course, I do have to add my little 2 cents. So as we all know, Nashville is very gentrified at the moment, and I will be adding clips about that in the next section of the video. But what I do realize from being on Facebook and like Nashville girl groups and working with people who moved to the area and things like that, I do hear a lot of people talking about the crime rate, talking about how it's ghetto in certain areas and how it's right down the street from the projects, etc., etc. And it's like, what did you expect? This wasn't your community. This wasn't a place that you were once accustomed to. So, of course, it's going to be different than the culture that you're used to. But I don't like how they kind of like, not demonize it, but villainize it. They villainize the community. They villainize the neighborhoods. They look down on it in a way. And it's just like, hey, you could have stayed where you were at if it was really a problem, you know? But now we're going to get into Nashville.
And this exact same thing is happening in Nashville and other big metropolitan cities across the country. And the sadder part is when the property value of that neighborhood goes up, houses that have not been remodeled yet or torn down yet still have to pay an increase within their rent. And the house has not been changed or remodeled, but they still have to pay an increase in rent for something that they haven't even received yet. And I would know because my neighborhood is currently being gentrified, and I now have to pay $1,000 more in rent for a house that they have not changed or remodeled. And some people in low-income areas already struggle enough with paying rent, but when more people move to that low-income area and jack up the property value, it gets even harder. Which now means that they have to struggle even more to pay their rent when they're not even the ones receiving a nicer house. And the only good thing that we get out of this is a Starbucks that nobody asks for. And this is why people complain about gentrification.
I'm going to try to squeeze this in so that people will actually watch it. Hopefully it won't be too long. Anyway, it's important. So, I don't know who knows this or not, Nashville is very rapidly being taken over by developers. I know a lot of big cities are. A lot of low-income housing, trailer parks, older apartments, older duplexes, that type of thing are being torn down and replaced by expensive developments. And the people who live there, who are normally frontline essential workers, who do low-income jobs that the people moving in don't want to do, those people are being displaced, and they can't find work close to the places that need them. But supposedly people just don't want to work because of the unemployment benefits that they've been given. While I'm sure that's true in some instances, for the most part, people are being displaced. You're not going to drive an hour and a half from where you have to live because that's where you can afford to a job in the city where you can no longer afford to live and make $7.25 an hour or even $12 an hour. That makes no sense. People are going to do that. That is why restaurants, fast food joints, anywhere, gas station, grocery store, anything, that's why they can't find workers. It's because they pay like crap and people are being displaced right and left. There is currently a trailer park in Nashville. It has existed for a lot of years, I believe longer than I've even been alive. There are people who have lived there for 20, 30 years. The trailer park is being sold to a developer. They are planning to evict everyone within the next month, month and a half. I believe they have to be out by the end of August. And there's nowhere comfortable to go anymore.
Just recently,
and these people are all,
I'll say 3 years,
low-income families. And they can't afford to move their trailers. And even if they could afford to move their trailers, it's very short notice, and they don't have anywhere to put them to keep them close to their jobs. So all of y'all that are super pressed about unemployment benefits and people living off the government, and are also super pressed about having to wait longer at McDonald's for your Egg McMuffin,
all the points that everyone hit on,
maybe if we quit letting greed control everything,
it's just
some of these things wouldn't be an
interesting to me
issue.
that
But it's not as simple as
all
people
of this
just
is
wanting to
going
live
on
off
in
of
my hometown,
unemployment
but
and
that's
not
the
work.
reason I'm making this
It's not
video,
that
is
simple.
to raise awareness on the issue. For the longest, I thought that gentrification was only affecting Nashville until I got on TikTok, until I heard about Hawaii, until that caused me to do more research in other areas. And I saw that Nashville is not special. Like, it's happening almost everywhere. And that is the reason I'm making this video, just to raise awareness on that. It's very scary to be like, am I going to be able to afford to live in the city next year? I already can't afford to live in the city, but I'm on the outskirts now, which is rising as well. People rent is jumping from $200 all the way to $500 in a year. So it's getting really crazy. And I don't know how the economy is going to sustain this for much longer. But we're going to go ahead and get into the next city of Austin, Texas. It kind of had the same come up story as Nashville. So let's get into these clips.
Let's talk about how the city of Austin and developers played the 40-year-long game with Rainy Street and used it to herald in an era of gentrification, pushing out of the populations of color within the city.
I just learned a really unfortunate statistic.
Cost of living
Austin area rent has increased by 40% in the past year. I would love to hear some rich people tell us how we're supposed to budget our way out of this situation. Who the fuck do you think is gonna make your fucking coffee when you're paying baristas like $12 an hour, maybe? Many of them are still making fucking minimum wage, which in Austin, in Texas in general, is still $7.25. Do you expect people to commute into your city to serve you? Like, make it make sense!
Business district, which would allow it to become a mixed-use space. They just wanted to grow their community through providing affordable housing, walkability, open spaces. That is now a very hot button issue when talking about ableism in the United States. They wanted bars and stores that they could patron. They also wanted the buildings to be built to a green standard at the time, and for any businesses in the district to have a relationship with the Mexican American Cultural Center. Instead, they got bars with twinkle lights that were very strategic in why they were placed there. These lower income families of color were being pushed out and then priced out of the homes that they had spent their lives in. Developers pushed bars as the first businesses to be part of this new zoning area because they knew it would drive out the residents. Residents like Richard Sanchez, who had to sell his home because not only could he no longer host friends and family because there was no parking, but he was having to call the police for noise complaints all the time because there were bars that were open until 2 o'clock in the morning with loud, yelling people always coming into his space. Other families tried to hold out, and that is when Austin property taxes began their skyrocketing ascent. In order to get homes from people who were unwilling to sell them, Austin began raising property taxes to a point where people who had even paid off mortgages on their homes for decades could no longer afford the payments on them. That's why when you calculate the cost of a home over time, if you buy one in Austin, it will end up costing way more than if you bought one in Southern California. And here's where the 40-year long game came along. Austin developers have been wanting to turn this into a bunch of skyrises since the 80s, and now they've finally gotten their way. Don't mourn for the bars, mourn for the families.
So this kind of touches on the same point that was mentioned in one of the Nashville clips about people having to commute an hour out from the city to go to work. And sometimes people do have to do that if there are not enough higher paying jobs in the area that they're in. But it's getting ridiculous. Like, the only people that are going to be able to afford this is people who are well off, people who are wealthy. And people who are living paycheck to paycheck are really, out of it. They're out of the equation. So I really like the point that this woman mentioned. Also, the next clip that was after this clip with saying how it was somewhat of a pre-planned thing and how they've been wanting the area for years, since the 80s. I don't think this is all like coincidental, which y'all get more into that in my conclusion, but I think she really hit on some really great points too. So now we're going to move on to Atlanta, Georgia.
Tanya Washington Hicks couldn't believe it.
I got an eviction notice mailed to me last Friday by my attorney.
Washington Hicks says last week the city emailed her lawyer a notice saying she had 30 days to vacate her home here on Atlanta Avenue.
I was very surprised. Very surprised.
That would mean that Georgia State University law professor, her husband, and their 5-year-old son would have to move out right around Thanksgiving.
It's unconscionable.
That's Washington crazy. Hicks has been fighting to stay in her home for years.
Eminent domain.
We intend to win it.
The battle centers on flooding. Atlanta has proposed building a park and a retention pond and drainage vaults to fix the problem.
Now, this is gentrification at its best.
Initiated in the first place.
Washington Hicks says the city is trying to claim eminent domain to bully her family and several other property
you stay
owners
strong,
from
sister.
their people's townhomes.
I am not going to obey an
I bought it in July of 1990.
It was a home on Ralph McGill Boulevard in one of Atlanta's most sought-after neighborhoods, the old 4th Ward.
This is a historical area. This is why you would buy over here.
A house Linda Willis says she intended to own until the day she died.
This is a sad day. After 30 years of paying a mortgage, it has become dangerous to be a senior and own gentrified urban property.
But back in November, she says her home was taken away from her in a matter of minutes when arriving to a bulldozer tearing her home down.
I went to the crane operator and says, who gave you permission to tear down my property?
She says he told her he was hired by a company who recently bought the home from a woman named Sinceria Willis. The problem, Linda says, she never put her home up for sale and had no clue as to who Sinceria Willis was.
How can you steal somebody's property?
Yo.
since my mom was born, and she's 40 something right now. So for a long time. And all around his house is these newer looking houses, and he's like the only house that really looks the same as it did years ago. It's really crazy to think about how this is happening all over America. But again, we're going to get into that into the conclusion. But this is our last few clips, and we're going to go to Miami, Florida.
You can hear, you can smell culture, you can taste it. Culture for us is everything. Culture is identity.
But that culture is under threat from a new and growing phenomenon: climate gentrification. We're in Little Haiti, or in Creole, Haiti. It's a Miami neighborhood filled with a thriving Haitian immigrant community and rising property rates.
Everyone who has a property in Little Haiti, they want to kick them out. That's my home.
Little Haiti is one of the fastest gentrifying neighborhoods in the United States. And the climate crisis has a lot to do with it. Experts expect Miami's sea level to rise more than a foot in just 25 years.
We're actually seeing the effects of climate change. We're seeing tidal flooding on sunny days. We're realizing that the seas are rising.
The city's famed beaches will eventually be submerged at high tide. And Little Haiti sits on a ridge far above these properties.
Suddenly somebody realized, oh wow, this seems to be one of the highest elevated points in Miami.
Its location has made it a hot spot for development, and Haitians are being forced out. More than 30,000 Haitian immigrants live in Miami, which has the largest population of Haitians in the U.S. Michel Bionome is one of them. He bought a house in Little Haiti 30 years ago. Now, it's prime real estate. He's received dozens of letters from realtors offering to buy his property.
That's one, but this one, that's the one that scared me. Dear Mr. Bien-Aimé, as a time for you to move, they scared me because they told me that's the time for me to leave the property. This is my property. I don't say I have for sale. So this is disrespect. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. No. They try to buy from us for cheap money, and then they're gonna make big money. But I don't wanna sell the house.
Michel chose not to respond to any of the letters, and his case isn't an isolated one. Neither is his immigration story. In the 70s and 80s, there was a surge of immigrants from Haiti due to political unrest in the country. Little Haiti became their cultural stronghold, and now climate gentrification is threatening it.
Climate gentrification in Miami is about the movement of people towards a higher ground and the displacement of those who have historically lived and developed communities on that high ground.
Miami Beach's coveted oceanfront properties are some of the most vulnerable in the country to sea level rise. Almost 1/3 of the area is expected to see chronic flooding by 2045. This means that it would see flooding at least 26 times a year, or on average,
To be honest, this subject fucks with my anxiety so bad. I really want to talk about this, but for some reason, my words cannot come together for me to articulate myself the way I want to. What this person said here is 100% true. I'm 40 years old, and I give you my age for perspective. I was born and raised in Little Haiti, Miami, Florida.
Gentrification is changing
33137, Civil Palm. Today, that community,
well, that's great
those
news.
apartment complexes are called Design Place.
Stuff, right?
When I tell you that my family, my last name, took up Little Haiti.
The changes disrupt the makeup of their culture.
Like, My formative years,
And most residents
from
are pushed out
birth
of their homes to attract
19
white
years
residents.
old is Little Haiti. Where my mom lives right now, we only lived there 1 year before I moved to Los Angeles. And that's pretty much Little Haiti adjacent, right? So when I say that this subject fucks with my anxiety, because when you think of your childhood, you think of sometimes, for most people, hopefully, they think of peace, they think of a better time. So when I go to Little Haiti now to go see my stepfather and to see the changes, even Curly's, I think it's called Curly's private school, they broke that shit down. They're building another mega private school there that's going to cost $50,000 a year to be there. They bought that piece of land for $60 million from what I understand. So here it is. Yeah, I was right. Curly's Notre Dame sells for $60 million. These people got the land for $3.8 million per acre. They will be opening a school called the Avenue, which is a private school that's also based in New York, for $50,000 a year. Nonetheless, now for the longest time, I've said that I'm sure Notre Dame Catholic Church on 62nd Street and 2nd Avenue must have known about this damn gentrification. They must have known, and I'm sure they known. Somebody even confirmed to me that they freaking knew. We'll talk about the Catholic Church profiting from the Haitian community in the first place. However, to determine the displacement that they say is not happening is to look at Miami Edison Senior High School, a school that would hold over 2,900 students. Their enrollment currently is 700. And to even look at how they're turning a lot of the schools in the area into K through 8s, they turn those schools into K through 8s for them to say that we don't need Miami Edison Middle, that they turned into a technical program, which is a magnet program that you actually have to get accepted to. Like, as I sit and think about this whole entire situation, how we were finessed out of Little Haiti, I'm pissed. Like, I'm literally pissed, but I'll come and talk more about the gentrification of Little Haiti very soon.
First things first, before I get into my main conclusion, I want to touch on the Little Haiti, Miami situation, and just point out that this is their, like, Little Haiti, this is their community. This is where they've been for decades and decades and decades. And now, since conditions are becoming unfavorable in other parts of Miami, now all of the developers want to start buying up their area, their houses, their neighborhoods, and their schools. And it's getting very serious because they are not going to stop. Just like that man was saying that he gets so many letters and of people offering to buy his homes. Same thing with my granddaddy. He told every single one of them, no, this is my home. This is where I want to die. And that's what that man is saying. But that's not going to stop them. And he has a right to feel disrespected because that's his home. That's his property. And they're making it seem like, hey, we want it. So go ahead, get up out of here. Which is a pattern that you're seeing in all of these other cities. They're raising the prices up so much that the people who were from those communities can't afford to buy property, to buy housing, to pay rent in that area, in that neighborhood. And it's really becoming a major epidemic, not just in Little Haiti, not just in Hawaii, not just in Nashville, not just in Austin, not just in Atlanta. It's happening literally all over America. I could have added Denver, Colorado to this video. I could have added Arizona to this video. I could have added Charleston, in Carolina in this video. I could have added so many more cities because it's happening in all of the major metropolitan cities in America. And that is kind of why I really wanted to do this video, because I want people to start connecting the dots. It's not just happening in your backyard. It's happening all over America. And it's not really because people are moving there. Like, yes, supply and demand, obviously. If there's not enough people wanting to move there, they're not going to be able to raise the prices. But it's all about this gentrification. That's what's really causing the spike in housing, the spike in cost of living, is gentrification. Me personally, I don't feel like it's an effective solution to tell people to stop coming. I can't tell people from California to stop coming. Well, I can tell them all day long, but that does not mean that they're going to listen. That does not mean that it's going to fix the problem. We really need the government to step in on this and start providing caps on rent increasing, to provide caps on how high people can. I mean, I know it doesn't sound good, but if something does not happen, people are going to be on the streets. That's how serious this is. People are going to be on the streets. So I do feel like some government intervention is needed. Not only that, but they're trying to cap how much travel nurses can make. If y'all want to step in and cap what travel nurses can make, which is really none of y'all business, then y'all should be trying to make sure people have their basic necessities, such as housing, such as having a roof over their head. That is important. Where are people going to live? Where are people going to sleep? So that's my 2 cents on the situation, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was very informational for you and brought awareness to gentrification and this epidemic that's going on in America. If you have any solutions, please comment them down below. I would love to read your solutions. I'm sure other people would love to read your solutions as well. Maybe there's something that can be done about this. But again, I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe, please like, please comment, support your small YouTubers. I have more think pieces coming out later on this week. So thank you again for watching, and you guys have a great rest of your day.